Well, I got settled down in this from Munich. We rode just box cars over to Krems, Austria, which is Stalag 17B. And the night we got in there, it must have been about in November, October or November. Well, we got settled down there, and I had another one of those pass out, heart attack now, see what the other. And anyway, got pretty good treatment there in Stalag 17. Every morning they bring us a half a barrel of hot water, and we had a few groceries, but they give us about 3 times a week. They give us a bread ration and a potato ration, and you keep those things, you know, eat on them. And then they give us some German coffee, they call it ersatz. And we survive on that. And being as a sergeant, didn't have to work any, but time would have passed off a lot sooner if I had. We had 2 or 3 people that taught different kinds of classes. We had a Philadelphia lawyer there. He taught business law, and it was interesting. And we had one, Johnny Gutierrez. He taught Spanish, and I took every course that he'd offered. So my growing up and then on the ranch and living on the border, I spoke some Spanish, but it's all pertaining to the ranch work and things like that. When I came back, I showed him, he made some diplomas, took for almost a year and a half. They gave me college credit for 8 hours of Spanish. And it helped me, because after I got out and was in college, it went to Mexico, worked down there for a couple of years. And so it all paid off, learning some of his Spanish. Life wasn't bad in the prison camp. We were right next door to 10,000 Russians. There was almost 5,000 Americans, and most of the time it was all airmen for the first time, and then others got to come in because they got captured or shot down near that camp. And they called us out twice a day for roll call, morning and night. The food wasn't real good, but I managed. The Russians were treated real badly. Every rank had to fall out and work. We'd see them going by our compound every morning. Generals on down. They did not belong to the Geneva Convention, and for some reason they never got in Red Cross parcels. We got Red Cross parcels occasionally. It was a pound of powdered milk, a half pound of sugar, and always 3 to 5 packs of cigarettes, which I didn't smoke. But guys that did, they'd trade you, oh, we got this D-bar, and we had a can of either salmon or bully beef, but whenever the Germans were giving to us, they'd always punch a hole in those cans so we couldn't save it up, because they always expected us to try to get away. And we dug tunnels. We dug tunnels over into the Russian compound. It was only about 40 feet at the most. Had to go there. the reason we had a Russian tunnel to the Russian compound, so we could get better acquainted with them, I guess. Just to have something to do it to confuse the Germans. As the Russians were coming into Vienna back in I guess January and February, we kept up pretty close touch with them. In February probably of 43, they got into Vienna, and boy, they were sacked because the smoke was going up way up there. And so they started moving us with groups of 500 back toward the American lines. And the group that I was with, we took off and were beside the Danube on the day that after Roosevelt died. I believe that was about the 12th of April of 45. Seemed like that's about the date. And nobody knew who Truman was. One guy finally figured out, he's from Missouri, he figured out who Truman was. But anyway, with that, in the group, the guards got to know you after a while, and I always had plenty of cigarettes because I didn't smoke. And we played poker for cigarettes, food. Well, I was going to tell you about the mail. Yeah, the mail. About 2 months, I think, after I was shot down, I got a letter from home. I was able to write home. And I think it took them about 2 months to ever get a letter from me. And then they found out my address, and my folks would send me a letter, and they found out they could send me a kind of a care package deal. And I got that in about a couple of months. And because tobacco was such a hot item to every nationality, well, I got to send $2 to R.J. Reynolds Company, and they'd send me a carton of cigarettes. Well, I've told them to change that to Prince Albert's in a can, because that was a good trading material. The prison life wasn't that bad as far as I was concerned, because having lived on a ranch all my life, I could survive. Guys from Chicago and other places, you hear a lot of complaining about the food. But we got a few Red Cross parcels, and help. Always in that Red Cross parcel, there was a pound of oleomargarine, which I never cultivated a taste for, but they were real good to make you a light out of. You'd take some cloth and kind of plait it together and dip it in this oleomargarine and get saturated with it, and it made a wonderful, we called it the butter lights. We played cards with them, and the guys in the 3-story bunks, they complained because they said the soot got in their nose and all that. And I guess they did, but we kept playing cards all night. The oleo was about as useless an instrument as people could think of to put in the package. We'd have a D bar and with a little sugar and a little coffee, and it was enough things in there for one guy to survive on 10 days. Or you could divide up among 10 men for 1 day. And we got a few of those through the International Red Cross, which was and always 3 to 5 packs of cigarettes. usually good cigarettes. Lucky Strike, a few Chesterfield. Most of them didn't like Chesterfield. I don't know why. It's all the same to me, but I never used to smoke. My tail gunner used to smoke, and I'd keep him in cigarettes. I contributed to his delinquency as much as could, I guess. But that was the most valuable thing there. When we was playing poker, they always had cigarettes, the most valuable thing. Next to D-bars and things like that, a few D. But anytime we had a can with willy beef or salmon or anything like that, they'd stick a Band-Aid in it where we couldn't save them up. But, and then after a week or two, if you want to open it up, you just open up the can and you cut that blue stuff off and throw it out. And the Russians would come over there sometime and they'd pick up what we threw away and eat. We would use the oleum sometimes to stop up the holes in the can that they punctured. The bedding was real comfortable. We had burlap bags as a container, and then we had some straw in there. And it wasn't too bad. You got accustomed to it. You always slept with all your clothes on in case you had to run. And keep warm. It got pretty cold some nights. But I never suffered because somewhere or another we got from these regular Army blankets. They had U.S., you know, so we knew there's all wool blankets. I don't know, I got, you know, after all these years, I got to figure out there had to be some kind of communication through some source. It might have been the International Red Cross. But Germans and Americans, they were kind of buddies, more so, 10 times better than the Russians. When I get out and people were moving toward the American lines instead of waiting there for the Russians. There's two places I went to trade, and they wanted me to stay there until the Russians went by. Because when we were in Krems, it was only about 25 miles down to Vienna. And as far as I know, that's about as close as the Russians came to by us. They didn't come into that Stalag 17 because all the fellows in there couldn't move. Some of them sick, and the camp commander was Ken Kortenbach. He stayed there, and the German doctor asked him to stay in his house because he had two girls, young girls, and he and the camp commander, we just elected him. He was a sergeant. We elected him in the voting process. That's where we did our no poll tax or anything, but we voted him in. Then I saw him in Albuquerque, and he died as a fellow. But he stayed there and protected until the Russians went by. Once they saw Americans there, well, they wouldn't mess with it. Fritz was our favorite guard. He came in to raise and thunder. We said, Fritz, calm down. Have a cup of coffee. He said, you crazy Americans. Said, you never take anything seriously. Said, that's why you can't win a war. So, the next war I get into, I'll take things pretty seriously. He bring me bread if I won't need it, and I'll give him cigarettes. He said, in Vienna, a pack of cigarettes is worth $12. Well, I had more Washington in my blood then than I do now. I said, French, I got a good deal for you. We'll divide that. You bring me $6 and I'll give you another pack of cigarettes. He said that he would, but except they wouldn't let him out of the gate. Take him. I could give him some, and he'd break the pack. They were broken pack. He could get out with that, but he couldn't get out. So he said, maybe we can get you through the hospital, and you trade places with one of the workers, Englishman. English could work. We didn't have any Americans in our camp that could work. You had to, according to the Geneva Convention, if you were a sergeant or above, you didn't have to work. That might have been one reason that we were all sergeants, I don't know. It wasn't good behavior, I'm sure of that. And he said, you trade places with an Englishman. So the English chaplain came over one time and I gave him 200 packs in a shoebox full. And I told him to hold them, use, take what he wanted, and I'd be over in the English compound since we worked out this deal. Well, a couple of Sundays went by and he never did show up again. Then another one came over and I said, where is Father so-and-so? He said, oh, they moved him out last week. I said, did he leave a package there with my name on it? He said, no, I haven't seen it. So I guess it went to a worthy cause anyway. Plus 200 packs. Some of the guards we had been on the Russian front. And if they gave us a lot of static, we'd invite them back toward the Russian front. Forget what country we're in now. And some of them were wounded, had been wounded and things like that. But yes, a rule, the guards were quite, I guess, sympathetic toward us because we took pretty good care of them. And then when they started marching us back toward the American lines, the civilians, they were real helpful, beneficial. I would strike up with one farmer. I learned enough German to ask for Brot and Eier, eggs, and things like that. And I'd run into a farmer, and boy, just being here, he'd cuss Hitler for all he could think of. We'd go down the road for a ways, and he'd meet his neighbor, and they'd zig heil Hitler. They couldn't even trust one another. Their kids even turned them in to things, see. So they had to all salute Hitler every time they met another German. As we were marching through, I didn't try to stay with the group all the time. Anytime I could get out, I could. And there was two guys with me. We went to a place one night, they was having a party there. Some way we were, as I remember it, we were in the middle of it. And I find out it's a bunch of German officers. Well, they didn't pay attention to us because we didn't have on, I guess that we didn't look like Americans. No one had ever said, except there was a girl. She says, follow me. She took off and followed her. And we could have been killed that night, you see. We didn't even know what it was. At another time, I was in this village, and night came on, and I wanted to find a warm place to sleep. Went to this house, and asked them if I could stay. See, so many places over there, they have the barn under the house because the heat from the animals keeps their house warm. And I was there, and I had this logbook that I've shown you with me. And there was a German soldier there. And he asked me where I had been in the Army. I told him I'd been in the tanks in North Africa, and because they didn't like flieger flyers, because then it came, some planes flew over, either English, see the English bombed at night, and we bombed in the daytime. We were the first daylight bombers they had over there. And they got all excited, and I went down into the barn down below the house, and some hay there, and there's an old sheep in there. She had a big old lamb that night, and it was the biggest darn sheep I ever saw. And next day, well, I got up and moved out to a safer climate. But I enjoyed my touring around and getting acquainted with the people, because they knew this thing had to be coming to an end, because they knew that the Russians were coming in one way and the Americans coming in the other. When we were on this, coming back toward the American lines in April of '45, the guards would tell us where we could stay, where we were going to stay tonight, and if it happened, the weather wasn't too bad, and we would just stay where we had to carry everything on our backs. And every evening, my tail gunner got shot down 2 days, but he got shot down on a Schweinfurt raid 2 days before I did. But when we got in the Stalag 17, we got together, and he was from Kansas City, and he would take my bed in and my backpack to where we were going that night, and I'd take off to the furthest farmhouse I could find, start trading tobacco for food. And people were always glad to see it. These old farmers, I would never trade them a can of tobacco. I'd give them part of a can. They'd take a little in their hand and kind of inhale it. They hadn't had any tobacco in 7 years. And while they felt that Prince Albert was the best thing in the world. They'd been smoking Timothy hay. And I watched one of them, he'd take a little bit of tobacco and mix it with his Timothy hay and still smoke it, because I didn't trade them enough to. But they would pull things out of their chimneys, food like pork and things like that, where they had hid from the soldiers or anybody else. And I always got plenty to eat along the way. One day we were coming by a field, and the people, 3 farmers up there planting potatoes. And potatoes, you had to section them up, maybe a quarter of one, in 3 or 4 pieces, and they were putting them in the field. Well, I knew enough. I gathered up a few of them while they were going the other way, and take them down to the creek and wash them off, and we got plenty to eat that way, because we didn't have, just had to kind of do our own thing when going back toward the American lines. The Russians were coming up from the east, and the American lines were coming in from the west. And all the people were trying to come toward the American lines. And some of them tried to get me to stay with them until the Russians went by, because they knew they thought they'd get better treatment, I guess, from the Americans. But I never did stay over with 1 or 2 nights. That's all I ever stayed out. For a pack of cigarettes, things like that, anything, the guards tried to get him, you see, and he didn't care. The first 3 days that we were coming out from Krems, Austria, the guard told me, I guess he told the other guys too, I'm sure he did, said the SS troopers are with us, but said better stay in line. And one guy came back one day with a bullet, had just grazed his coat. like that. And boy, he got in the center of the line. He never got out. So after 3 days, he said the SS trooper went with us. So then I started going out, and he knew where we'd stop. And I trade with the people. When the Russians came into Vienna, they started moving us back toward the American lines in groups of 500. And then we had some 2 or 3 guards, 500 always. And after we got away from the Danube area, they just kept taking us along. And that's when I would get out and go visit with the civilians. One town I went into, and the card was right there, and the gal threw me a potato. You know, sometimes you get there and get a little hungry because the Germans didn't feed us anything. They may have tried to once or twice, but I had better food. I would go out and trade and bring it in. Eggs were pretty valuable, and I traded a little tobacco for eggs and things like that. And this girl threw me a potato, and this guard looked at her. He could have shot her. You see, they had the ability, I mean the permission and all that to do anything they wanted to. Those German guards did, and I was in, I think, the same town, and I had a bar of Sweetheart soap. My folks had sent me kind of a care package. It was toothpaste and lots of things in there, and there happened to be a bar there. And I just smell of it, you know. I thought, this might come in handy with the right person. So we were negotiating with these 2 or 3 of these gals, and I finally got 9 eggs. They gave me 9 eggs for that. I let them smell it, smell it. It stunk like everything. And finally got 9 eggs out of it. So that was the most valuable thing, except for Prince Albert in the can. The war was over the 3rd of May. I believe the 1st or 2nd of May, we woke up one morning and the 3rd and the 7th Army had overlapped, and they came in there. And there was a little boy in the 7th Army. He came to there and said, you guys are free. We scattered like a bunch of quail. I went to a town, started into it west toward the American line, because I didn't speak Russian well enough to head back to my homestead. So I started walking. It must have been 50 guys going along. There came an old boy in a wagon, and one horse was way ahead of the other. And I got on the wagon with me. He said, "You know how to drive a horse and a wagon?" I said, "Sure did. I lived on a ranch when I was growing up. Well, we always had horses and wagons." So I got rode. We went into this town, and I tied the horses up outside so that the farmer could get them. You know, walked into this town, and it was kind of shot up. And running into this old sergeant, he said, I identified myself. He said, "Don't you be going around this town without a gun." And he said, "Down in this corner here, you'll find a whole stack of guns. You pick out one. And down on the next block over there, you'll find a lot of ammo. You get your gun. Don't be caught without a gun." So I went down there and found me an over and an under rifle, hunting rifle. I went on down there and found some shells that fit. And in the process, someplace somebody had stashed away a pretty good bicycle. So I liberated that. I knew they were going in place that day anyway. So I got my rifle and my ammo, and bicycle, headed back toward the camp. Rode on back to camp, and they'd moved everybody out. They said they were going to fly us into France. Well, I had this good bicycle. It was a good one. So I looked it up, and it was 40 kilometers to some well-known town back be kind of southeast of Brownell. What is it? It's a music. I can't think of the name of it. But it said 40 kilometers. I thought this bike is running pretty good. And I'm going to head down that way because I knew I had a few free days. I went by a farmhouse and a dozen guys ran out with a German uniform, but they had a big H sewed on their collar. And you could tell it was freshly sewn on there. And I didn't know enough about what was going on, but they were Hungarians. And when Germany went into Hungary, they told these young guys, you'll either get shot or you join them. And they came out with their hands up. They all wanted to surrender to me. And I thought, I got looking at my road map and decided I might be going the wrong direction here, you know, because I was the head of the army. So I put that bike in reverse and went on back. And next day, or that day, maybe later that day, ran into an American soldier who was in this town. And he happened to be from the same town where my folks were living here at Bront. And he knew my sisters. And we got acquainted, and he said, yeah, I'll put you up tonight at his favorite hotel. He'd confiscated a room, a 3-story building at a house, and he said, you can stay there. So I went to his place, and he said, now don't go to that toilet on the first floor because it's booby-trapped. So we went on up to there, he had a bed, and threw out a feather mattress on the floor. The Germans always slept, they had a pretty good house. And I slept on that thing, and it was the most uncomfortable night I ever spent. I just couldn't get used to it, you know. Because I'd been sleeping on my favorite any place I could. We sleep on the ground 2 or 3 times. One time when I was marching back there, we found a barn, and there was a bunch of old hens were scared up in there, and started looking for the eggs. Found a lot of eggs where they laid. I'm sure the people didn't want them, so we had them for breakfast. Coburn and I was frying eggs one morning. Coburn wasn't much of an outdoorsman. And I'd bring, of course, to divide all my food with him and all that, because he carried my backpack for a few miles. And to me, it was all well and good. And they flew us back into France. Can't think of the camp thing. And they said, now, don't you boys drink anything at all around here. You eat what we give you because your stomach is in bad shape. And I'm sure they were right. I'm sure they knew what they were doing. But they said, you stay here now for about 10 days and we'll get you in a good health and all that. And this friend of mine talked me into going to a local refreshment center there. And at about dark, they ran out. They serving us some stuff. He said it was bay rum. And I'd never tasted the bay rum, so I guess maybe it was. We started back to where Camp Lucky Strike is where we were. And we were just walking across the way, and there was a Frenchman out there. He was waving his arms. I thought he was greeting us. We got over to see what he's about. He said, "You crazy American, that's a minefield you just walked over." I said, "Oh, well, these French are funny people, you know." Make all kinds of signs. And I got over there and he told us that. So we were going back there where we had, because we've been there 2 or 3 days. And there was a bunch of soldiers standing in reveille. They worked at Camp Lucky Strike. Behind them there was a pile of chicken about that high. But Clem and I went in there and kind of helped ourselves and turned around with another tent and run into an officer. He said, "What the hell are you guys trying to do?" So, "Oh, we've been at a prison camp. We just couldn't resist stealing some of that chicken." He said, "Did you get enough?" We had both hands full. Yeah, this loves. And we'd steal a loaf of bread every night. That bread would taste just like cake does now, because we hadn't had enough sugar for it. Then I decided it's getting pretty confined out there. Too many restrictions, so I caught a truck into Paris. And this truck driver said, "Do you have a pass?" I said, "No, I lost it." He said, "Don't worry, I got one." We went into where Joan of Arc. We went through this town, Joan of Arc. We went into Paris, and I went in and took a shower at the place, and started gradually working my way back to camp, and came to this place where Joan of Arc was buried. It's where they make this real fancy wine too. The priests make it. I can't remember the town. Can't remember the name of the wine now. I didn't go out and see her grave, but I've been close. Got back, and Eisenhower was making a speech over in a few tents from where we were. But we had a good poker game going, and some of the people that I knew, they were leaving. They gave me a few French francs, and I didn't even get to go over and greet Eisenhower. Had I known he'd be a president, maybe I would broke up. Instead of going to the poker game, I'd stayed with him. Then they said, we'd go to, if anybody wants to go to England, they told us where to go and get on, or where do you want to go to the States? Of course, I wanted to get back to see Lillian as quick as I could, but I detour back and went to my old outfit and played a few hands with them, and saw Joan. I stayed over there for a month. Then the order came, any American without papers up to date, they're going to start picking them up. So I thought, well, maybe I better get them back home. So I went to Southampton, and 12 days later we landed in beautiful harbor in Boston, which was the dirtiest darn place I'd ever been. We kept us out there all night, and then the next day they put us on a bus, gave us some orders and things, and came on down to New York, and I had to change to a train there. Came on down. Next place I got off was in Taylor, Texas. My mom and dad were down there, and my sister, two of my sisters were there. And I kept messing around in San Antonio, and then finally, the 1st of November, they gave me discharge and ended my career. Or kind of started, I guess, because I found my way to Alpine and sugar baby. Some of the American prisoners, when the Germans surrendered to them, they had an egg or something in their pocket, they'd mash it, just from their meanness. And I never had any ill feeling to any of them. I figure everybody was trying to do their job like I was. But it was all interesting.
After my junior year of high school, I was ill in this part of the country with allergies. So I went to Valentine, Texas, out in West Texas, to visit my aunt. And when I was there, Leo and his family worked with my aunt and uncle. So while I was with my aunt, she had a visitor one day, and Leo came by, and she said, let's have a picnic and go out on the hill and have a picnic. So she made a picnic lunch, and the three of us went out to have a picnic. I was 15, he was 23. And on the hillside came a cloudburst just as we got ready to eat our picnic lunch. And so we headed home in a hurry, and we came to an arroyo that had been dry, but it was running swift and wide. So Leo jumped across it, and he reached out to my aunt, and he said, put your hand out, I'll pull you, and you jump. And they did, and she came across. So then he put his hand out to me, and he said, jump, and I'll pull. I jumped, and he didn't pull. And I landed in the water, and 67 years later, I'm trying to get even with him. So that's how I met him, and then I met his family and continued to know about his military life after that. I first started getting letters several months after that. I had a birthday after I heard that he was missing. I got a birthday card from him, but it was 3 months late. So it took a long time to get communication back and forth. And after that, we wrote occasionally. He would write about the prison camp, and I wrote to him about things that were going on in college. I was in college at that time. And we had our letters censored because I tried to tell him where certain people were, and the Army marked that part out, and it was censored. I continued to hear from him until he was liberated. When he came back in August of 1945, he came to the college where I was going to school in Alpine. And he drove in a 1939 Plymouth with 4 airplane tires. And he asked me if I'd like to go to Big Bend, Texas, which was about 90 miles away. So I said yes. I cut a class, had missed a test, and we went to the Big Bend for the day and came back. And then this was August of 1945, and we continued to get back and forth. Thanksgiving came down to see our families. Were married in San Angelo, Texas in 1940. At the first time he mentioned, he said, you know you're going to marry me, and I thought, yeah, sure. But it kind of grew into this, but Thanksgiving, when we came to visit the families, I knew his family because I'd met him years before, and he knew my family, so we came to visit both of them. And on the way back, I had become sick, so he took me back to Alpine. And we left early in the morning and stopped off, I guess maybe you'd say the closest to asking me to marry him. He said, do you think we should stop in San Angelo and buy a set of rings? So on our way back to Alpine, we bought the rings, and I guess it was mutual consideration at that time. And he took me back to Alpine, and the next thing I heard from him, he was back down in Central Texas. And he had gone to ask my mother and dad for permission to marry me.
That wasn't exactly the way it was.
He came and told him maybe, I don't know, he told me he asked him. And then we married in December, and he started college with me in Alpine and went one semester there with me until I graduated. And then we moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, where he finished his college work at New Mexico State. And I taught school. We lived there where some of our kids were born.
I decided that I wasn't going back to cowboying at $25 a month. And I wrote these things down that I'm going to get out of here and go to college. I'm going to join the church, and I'm going to join the Masonic order if they'll take me out. And in the meantime, stopped off in Alpine before and got acquainted with her before I did accomplished all these other things. Life has been good to me. I've had several opportunities to go up in restored B-17s, but I've always been a little reluctant because they won't give me a parachute.